Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today we are doing my February wrap-up. I actually originally wasn't planning on doing a February wrap-up because for the majority of the month I had read 1.5 books, and so I was like, I'll just skip it and like combine my February books with my March wrap-up. But then truly in the last week of February I finished the half book I was reading, finished an entire other book, and listened to like 6 short audiobooks. So now I have 9 books to talk about. So I was like, I guess I'm doing a February wrap-up. That's enough books to talk about. So let's just get into it. I don't have any update this month on my TBR clear out project. I did not make any progress on that in February. February it was a bit of a rough reading month. It was kind of a rough month in general. Things have been a little bit crazy. I have been very, very stressed, as have many, many people. So just been, you know, stressed and overwhelmed, and I am definitely the kind of person that like the more stressed I am, the less I read, and so that's why for the majority of the month I didn't get a lot of reading done. But I think towards the end of the month, while things have not necessarily gotten better, I guess I've reached a little bit of like an internal equilibrium enough that I can, you know, get back into reading. Anyways, let's just get into it. The first thing that I finished in February was a reread of Goblin Quest by Jim C. Hines. This is the first book in a fantasy trilogy that I first read when I was probably in like high school or something, and then I have not read it since, so I've been meaning to reread it for a while now, and I finally decided this was the moment because I was in the mood for something very light. You know, I had on my mental TBR some heavier books, and I just was like, I am not in the mental state to read anything that is heavy or complicated or emotional or anything. I need something that is just a silly, goofy time. And that's essentially what this is. So this story is pretty much like a book version of a really classic Dungeons and Dragons, like dungeon crawl adventure, right? There is a group of adventurers who are in search of a magical item. They are traveling, like making their way through these like goblin and hobgoblin infested caves to find this item, and they're gonna have to like fight maybe a necromancer, maybe a dragon, maybe some other things along the way to get there. And even like each of the characters in this group very clearly fall into like D&D like races and classes. Like there's a dwarf cleric, and there's the elf rogue, and like all of that. However, the thing that's unusual about this is that the story is actually being told from the perspective of who would essentially be a goblin NPC, right? A character that we don't normally get a perspective from, but our main character is Jig the Goblin. And Jig, he doesn't really fit in with the other goblins. They think that he is cowardly, which in most cases it's more just that it doesn't like throw himself into danger with no thought to his own safety, but to them that is cowardly. But he gets kind of swept up in this quest. He gets captured and dragged along, and they want him to like show them the way through the caves. And as much as this is following some very like classic elements of D&D, being told from Jig's perspective, which is this very like outsider perspective, this ability to see and point out the inherent assumptions and contradictions and sometimes inequality of some of the elements of classic fantasy and D&D, especially in the way that these adventurers treat other races or classes, and some of the inequality and prejudice there, which is really interesting. And I think that that's kind of the thing that makes this interesting, is having that perspective that is kind of almost deconstructing some of these assumptions that are baked into so much fantasy, and especially into like a D&D campaign, and having this character that kind of steps outside of it. This also definitely has some humor to it, which is fun. I think my main like complaint with this is just that because it is following this sort of dungeon crawl setup, the plot itself gets very repetitive in some ways. It's not the most interesting because it's just like they're in the caves, they go into this cavern, they fight these, you know, be it monsters or whatever. They go into the next cavern, they fight them. They go into the next cavern, they fight them. Like, you know, it's not the most fascinating setup. So it has some like pros and cons to it, but it was fun to revisit this. And it reminded me that I do really enjoy some of the humor of Jim C. Hines. I don't think at the moment I'm going to continue my reread of this series, but I might go back and reread some other series from him that I've read. He's also published some stuff that since I last, you know, read his books, so maybe I'll go try out some of his other things, but it was fun to revisit this. Then I read Mystic and Rider by SHARON SHINN. This is a part of my Do I Like SHARON SHINN reading vlog, which I will link in the description. I just posted it, and this will be a little bit of a spoiler for that vlog, that the answer is yes, I do like SHARON SHINN. But if you want to see more of me talking about these books, you can go check out that vlog. But Mystic and Rider is the first book in the 12 Houses series, which is a 5-book fantasy series. In this first one, it is set in this fantasy world called Gillingaria, where there are 12 houses. So it is ruled by a king, but then there are 12 noble houses. And in this world, there are people with magic. They are called mystics. And there has kind of always been some dislike or distrust of people with magic, but over the last few years it seems to be getting worse. And so the king has sent this group of people out to essentially investigate how bad is it? Like, do we have a civil war on our hands? And so we're following this group, which is made up of both mystics and riders. So we have magic users and riders who are the king's riders, which are kind of like his most elite warriors who are like completely loyal to the king. So hence the name Mystic and Rider. And we're following this group as they are traveling among the houses, particularly the southern houses, because those are the ones that have been having the most suspicious activity, as they are discovering that there is a kind of fanatical religious cult that is encouraging this growing hatred towards mystics. So the story ends up being kind of a journey story as they are traveling from town to town, noble house to noble house, but we also are really following, you know, these characters. We get this little found family. There are some tensions between them. Some of the riders don't really like mystics, and you know, but they get to know each other over the course of the story. And yeah, I really enjoyed this. I found that I really like SHARON SHINN's like her writing, the way that she constructs a world and her characters. There is a little like whisper of a romance in this, which I really enjoyed how like slow it was. It's the kind of romance where you're like, is this happening? Like, what is anything happening? I don't know. Until you get like to the end where there's at least any indication of like, okay, yes, for sure they like each other. So if you want a very subtle, slow burn romance that has you questioning like, am I imagining that they like each other? Then maybe you'll like this. I certainly would not categorize this as a romance. I wouldn't read it just for the romance because it is very much a subplot, but I do enjoy a good slow burn subplot romance. Yeah, I think the only thing that I just didn't like as much about this is that it is a journey book. I don't really like journeys and road trips and all of that in my books. I like it when characters pretty much just stay in one place. But this did end up feeling a little meandering. However, I will say that I do think that the amount that I enjoyed this, I gave this 4 stars, is really a testament to how much I enjoyed like her writing, her world, her characters, all of that, because I enjoyed this so much in a plot line that I don't even like, you know? I don't like journeys. And so I think that it shows just how enjoyable the other aspects were that it could sell me on it. After that, I read or I listened to a bunch of audiobooks for some fantasy romances, which like fantasy romance or romantasy is not really my thing. So it was very unusual for me to read any fantasy romance. And most of these, I think the one I liked the most got 3.5 stars. The one I liked the least got 2 stars, and I was like, that is generous. Maybe it should have gotten less. And I don't know. For some reason at the time, it was just something that I was in the mood for, even though as I was reading them, I was kind of like, I don't think I like these, but I also am gonna keep listening to them. I think that this is kind of swinging back to that, like, I just want something that's kind of a silly, goofy time, you know? Anyways, I started out with The Harvest Bride by Katie Wilde. Also, this is all from the Deadlands series by Katie Wilde, but I started out with The Harvest Bride, which I think is like 4.5 in the series. I don't really remember how I ended up starting here, but this one is like, I'm trying to think, do I even remember what these are about? I think in this one we're following a woman who was affected by some kind of sickness that turned her into stone, and then when she was finally cured and turned back from stone, the man that she had been engaged to had married somebody else, and so now she has been living in like this small village on her own. But there is, of course, some other man who is now interested in her, but she thinks that he's just sort of like this boisterous, bragging kind of guy and isn't really serious, and doesn't realize how much he actually cares about her. And then there's something about like demons in the woods. But yeah, this was super, super short. It was okay. I think that it was very silly, honestly, and a lot of the way that I think something also just for me maybe in romantasy in general, but this also may just be the fact that this was kind of I don't know if this is a novella or a short story, it was very short, that it jumps very quickly like right into like the spicy parts of, or at least into like them thinking about it, and like to me I'm just like, this is just goofy. Like it needs a little more build up in order for me to not just feel like this is silly. So, you know, it wasn't terrible, but I was not a big fan. After that, I read The Midwinter Mail Order Bride, also in this series. So this one is the first book in the series. I went back to the beginning and just like read them in order from there. This is one of the longer ones in the series, and I think that that was very beneficial to it. It was also my favorite in the series, which is not saying a whole lot because the bar was low, but this is the one that got 3.5 stars. In this one, we're following this barbarian who had like killed a tyrant and is now king of like 4 different kingdoms, and like his steward decides that he needs a wife, and so he has like sent out notice for that, you know, he's looking for a bride, hence the mail order part of the story. And nobody responds for a long time until one day one princess shows up, and she essentially like she has been drugged and essentially tells him like, my plan is to kill you. My plan is to marry you and then kill you. Which he is like, I'm on board for this. I like the feistiness, like I'm into it, let's get married. And then she says that she has to go back to her kingdom because she believes that her family is in danger. And so he agrees to go back with her to go like save her family and her kingdom. But at this point, the two of them are not like together. It's one of the situations where like they're both kind of interested in each other, but they're not going to admit it. And he's like, oh no, I'm just coming like to help you out. And they end up in a situation where like both of them like each other, but because of a like misunderstanding or miscommunication, they think that the other one isn't interested in them, and you just end up in this situation where you're like, both of these idiots love each other. Like, oh my god, just talk to each other. However, in this context, it was kind of fun. I enjoyed that element of it. Again, I felt like it was kind of silly, but at least it wasn't horribly cringy, I guess. I'm okay with silly, I just can't handle cringy. So this one was my favorite of the bunch. And I think that part of it was the dynamic between the characters, and part of it was, I think, just that they had a little more time and a little more build up. Then I read The Midnight Bride, which I'm struggling to remember which one this is. I think this is the one where they are like on some like competition. The girl is like in this competition because she has to like go retrieve this magical gauntlet in order to save her family, but the guy has this like blood oath that he will prevent people from retrieving this magical gauntlet because it's too powerful. And so he is kind of traveling sort of with her, sort of like trailing behind her, just to make sure that nobody actually gets it. But along the way, from spending time together, he falls in love with her, and then like, you know, all of that happens. And this one I think was like just okay. I didn't have a lot of feelings about that. Then I read Pretty Bride, which was the worst in all of these, which I gave it 2 stars. I honestly was like, that's probably too generous. Maybe it should be 1 star. I don't know. This was really short. It was not, that wasn't the thing that made me dislike it though. There are things about the spicy scenes and the stuff that happens that as I just was like, what did I just read? Like she gives a disclaimer at the beginning, like this is gonna get like real weird real fast, and I'm like, this is not weird in a fun way. This is just like, I don't like this. I don't really want to recount to you what was so like weird about this, but I think I did see a review that pretty like clearly explained what happened in this. I'll link it in the description if you want to know. I really hated this one. It was not good. After that, I read The Stoneheart Bride, which was even shorter. This is like 50 pages or something. I actually had to read this one as an ebook because there wasn't an audiobook for it. And this one was fine. I liked the premise of it, I think, but it was just too short. Like if this one had been, if it had taken like these 2 characters and given them a longer book that was more like 250 to 300 pages, more similar to the length of the one that was like the mail order bride, I feel like that it could have been good. Essentially, I think it starts out with like, this girl has been kidnapped by ogres, and then this guy comes and saves her, and apparently her like, I don't know if is it her uncle, I think, has been trying to negotiate her to marry this guy, but he rejected the negotiations, and so she's like, oh my god, he hates me, and he's like, no, I don't really, and like they get together and everything. But I feel like there was enough like kind of backstory that was just told to us that could have been an actual book, could have been a story, but we just got the like moment in time when they get together, and I was like, you know, it wasn't a bad, I would have read a longer book about those 2. And then there was Evil Twin, which was another one that was not good. This not as bad as Pretty Bride, but certainly worse than a lot of the other ones. Another one that had spicy scene that I was just like, what is going on? Like, why? I saw some other people in reviews saying that they particularly liked this one scene, and I just was like, I do not get it. But I know I'm being very vague, but I'm just like, I'm not gonna recount the details of this scene on here. Anyways, this whole series was a really weird, like, blip in my reading. I really don't know how to feel about, like, it was one of those times where I'm just really like, I don't really like these, but it is kind of what I'm in the mood for, which like happens to me once in a while. And I just am always like, I'm not quite sure how to rate it, but as I said, most of them landed around 3 stars, except for the one that was like the slightly best and the one that was like really not good. There are more books in the series. Initially, I was planning to read all of the books in the series, but I kind of hit a wall where I was like, okay, I'm done now. Like, that was good. If I ever am back in this whatever weird mood this is, I guess there are more books for me to read. I don't know. Oh, also, one of my complaints about this is that I don't know if it's every book or almost every book in this series ends in pregnancy, and I'm just like, meh, that's not a favorite like trope for me with romances. Like, that's not the like epitome of happily ever after. Just let them get together and like live their lives. Anyways, it was a weird time. But then I finished another book, which was Troubled Waters by SHARON SHINN. This was the other book in my Do I Like SHARON SHINN vlog. And I had so much fun reading this. So this is following our main character, Zoe, who her father was once like a important advisor to the king, was very close to the king, but then was exiled like 10 or 12 years ago. And so she has been living in exile with her father for the last like 10 to 12 years. The book opens on her father's funeral. He has just passed away after sickness, and she is grieving. Very soon after the funeral, someone shows up to tell her that the king has ordered her to come to the capital for her to marry him and become his 5th wife. And she kind of just goes with him. She's in this like fugue state of grief, and she's like, might as well happen. Also, I want to get out of this town where like I just am grieving my father. So she goes with him, and then very quickly ends up kind of like running away and disappearing into the city and really just restarting her life. She creates a new life for herself, and then eventually kind of reconnects with some family in the city, which then brings her back around to interacting with the royal court. I really enjoyed this. I really was excited to be back in one of SHARON SHINN's worlds. After reading Mystic and Rider, I just was like, I really like her writing and the vibes. Like, I just want to be back in her writing and her world. So I was really excited to be back into this one. And I ended up enjoying this even more than Mystic and Rider. I think this one is more like up my alley, because it's a bit of a smaller scope. Mystic and Rider is more that like large scope, like, do we have a civil war on our hands? Whereas Troubled Waters is more about Zoe and her character. The politics in it are more of the like interpersonal court intrigue kind of politics, but a lot of it's following Zoe as she is kind of restarting her life, figuring out what she wants for herself and what she wants from her life, reconnecting with family, making some new friends, discovering a lot of both family secrets and like court secrets along the way, but having this kind of like smaller scope that is more focused on the characters is certainly more my speed when it comes to stories. I also really liked the world in this. I think the world was a little more creative in Troubled Waters. It has a really distinct like vibe to it that I liked and kept me coming back to it. This is another one that it does have romance in it, but again, it's just like a whisper of romance. It takes like 60% of the book to get to a point where it's like they have a conversation where there's clearly some like tension between them. And then it takes, you know, much longer for them to get to a kiss. So it is very slow burn. It is very, like, I loved it so much. I did feel at the end that I wanted like a little bit something more from the main love interest, just because as much as I enjoyed how like slow burn it was and how much it was one of those like, what is he thinking, you know? At the end, I just felt like he was a little too opaque and I just wanted like a little something more from him. But overall, I had so much fun reading this. I absolutely loved it. I gave this 5 stars. And yeah, I am gonna continue on in the series. Okay, so those are all the books that I read in February. Hopefully next month I will have more SHARON SHINN to talk to you about, because now I'm really excited about reading her books. But I would love to know how your February reading went. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye.